Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Seattle-based jazz saxophonist and flutist, the very talented Mark Lewis. He is a very well-traveled jazz cat that has created a large body of music over the past 4 decades. He has been a part of the jazz scenes from Seattle and San Francisco to Rotterdam and Paris. He swung through Kansas City in 2017 as a part of the Charlie Parker Celebration Week, and we wanted to catch up with him about his visit and his rich life and music. This will be the first installment in our interviews with Mark. He has a lot to say, and we love it. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Yeah, hi, Mark.
Oh, hi. Here, let me turn off my metronome here.
Sure.
Kansas City, huh?
Kansas City, Missouri, yes.
Oh, that's good. My grandfather used to call it Missouri. He was from St. Joe.
Oh, yeah. You have latitude when you're from here to throw all those vowels around.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
That's good, though.
Yeah.
I like the city. It's a great city, and there's a lot of saxophone players there, I noticed.
There are a lot of saxophone players, yeah, and I'm kind of envious of where you're at up there, so I feel the same way.
Oh, yeah?
Oh,
yeah, well, I'll trade you. How's that sound?
Well, let's do it. Let's do it for a little while at least.
Okay. Do you know how to use a recording studio? Because I live in one.
Kind of. I could figure it out.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's real easy.
Yeah.
All you have to do is press the button that says record and play at the same time, and then you got it made.
I like it. Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
All right.
Well, hey, Mark, thanks for taking a minute out, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate the publicity.
Absolutely. So let me just dive right in here. You know, I saw you in Kansas City on stage, and I was intrigued by your playing, very impressed, and I want to know what's going on with you with recordings and things maybe lately in your life.
I have so many projects coming together at once. You know, it's funny because David Friesen and I have made a new recording together as a duet, and that's real nice, just bass and saxophone. And then we want to do another recording with the group in New York. That was such a nice fit. We made the whole album, 11 songs, in 5 hours. So it was a really a fun group to play with in the studio. They just 1 or 2 takes, and that's enough. And that's the way I look at it too. The studio for jazz is not made. The studio is basically a half-track studio for jazz, if you think of it that way. That is, if I record a band in the studio, I record them live. That is, everything's at the same time with jazz. A lot of studios don't do that. They'll record parts at a time. And to me, the jazz it might sound perfect, but it's not what it's cracked up to be. I mean, if you really listen to it, it doesn't take a lot of listenings because there's not a lot to hear. It's the imperfections and the surprises in jazz which I think make it sublime. And these things don't occur as much when you multi-track an album or fix it to the state of perfection, because the surprises, even if it's just a slight fluctuation in the stretching or compression of time that you didn't expect, because true jazz is similar to African music. It has a lot, or European as well. It has a lot of compressions and expansions of time. So that you always know where one is, but the time is not like a metronome where it's always exactly the same, and that's due to the phrasing of the horn player and the rhythm section, how they feel the cadences and interact with each other, and of course how much the drummer is doing. So this, to me, is stifled when you can't record at the same time. And multi-track studios that have separate rooms for the recordings usually have bleed-through. You're going to have to record it, the quieter instruments at least, and bass is one of the quieter instruments at different times. That's why I think that we really have to be using live things in jazz a lot more than we have, because I think that jazz today has become a bit sterile for the public, and the public has a hard time relating to it. It might be musically breaking grounds as far as improvising over, for instance, a major seventh with a +5 and a minor third is what I'm trying to say. I was trying to think. There's two schools of thought. So you could say an augmented ninth, which, in my opinion, is the proper way to say this particular spelling of the chord, but some people refer to it as a minor third, even though it's an extension. I don't know why. I think they think that that's what it sounds like, and that's exactly what it sounds like, but so does a perfect unison sound like an augmented seventh. What I'm trying to say is a perfect octave sounds like an augmented seventh. So you have these things going out to the public which are really interesting. They don't occur naturally in harmonics unless you're using some strange bell tones which are exactly crafted for that. So as a result, linear vibrations don't have this, and this is what we're used to. But it does occur in a man's imagination, and you can use scales on it which fit these chords, and that's what people are doing, and that's fine. They're very hard to hear. If you can hear them, that's good for you. I can't hear them in 12 keys going this fast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, if you're going to make something, I think you should be able to hear it. And I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of geniuses around the world these days, but I think there's a lot of people that want to make themselves seem like geniuses. And that's not, to me, that's stifled jazz more than it's helped it. Now, I'm talking about performance music. I'm not talking about the intellectual side of it, because there's a lot of great teachers that teach new things, and it's great to have this in our world, because we need to have intelligent and creative thought in all musics, and without that, the art form doesn't exist. And in fact, this particular example I'm talking about comes from one of my favorite intellectuals, Scott Reeves, and he is a fine musician as well as a jazz intellectual. And so, he can, maybe Scott can hear this stuff,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it's funny because there comes a point where you say, yes, I can hear that. I don't know if I'd be able just to hear this passing, without really trying hard. But it's always good to ear train. So these are the things I'm thinking about musically right now. I've written quite a bit of tunes which have linear experimentations with chords, sometimes horizontal, vertical as well. So that's one idea that I'm working on with my music, is how far should I take experimentation in a vertical manner. That means with chords, horizontally looking at the page with lines. And for a while I was listening to Lenny Tristano a lot, so I was writing a lot of long lines which came out nicely at the end, and I like that a lot. That's maybe why people say I'm melodic, is because that's what I like to do. You couldn't really tell what I play at that concert that you listened to, because I wasn't given a chance to play. So as a result, you just heard one song which I played very straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. So I don't know. That wasn't really a representation of what I do. But you do what you can to make the show the best you can do, and that's what I try to do. I was working with the people that were producing it, and I had to basically fight to get that in there, because that wasn't even going to be in there. So it was kind of a strange situation. They just kind of forgot about me. So they put me back in that point, and it was just. I'm sorry to say that the show was really hard for me to play, because I didn't have a sense of continuity with all the musicians involved. Even though they tried to get everybody together, it's just that I don't know who planned it or what, but it was a very difficult thing for most musicians, I think, to work together in that respect without any direction. So maybe if I ever get asked again to play that show, it would be nice to know exactly what's going to go on before we play it. but it was a nice show, and the people that were involved in the show, as far as making it happen, we've met them, and they're very nice people, and they put a lot of money into it and a lot of time, and so that's why the musicians, I thought, and including Bobby Watson and other musicians, thought that it was very important to have a diversity of thought in the show. And so we basically had to kind of pound out our ideas if we wanted them to be listened to. And those musicians whom I'd never met before in Kansas City, they all stood behind me. And I'm the new guy that comes in there and just plays. And they said, but I was very, very honored to be hired, and I will always do the best I can, when I'm playing. So I'm getting back to the point, getting back to your question. Basically, right now I'm trying to get out this album, the New York album, and I have another trio album that I was thinking about doing too. I hate to just keep pushing these albums back because I know how that feels. We had the same problem with the Donald Trump election. We were going to release this album in November, and of course the elections were going on, so it wasn't a good idea then to release it in November, and that was already a year and a half or a year and some time after the recording session, so I was getting antsy. And it's also money that you have invested that you're not doing anything with.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, you do actually have to keep a ledger with these albums, with these CDs, even though you're lucky if you break zero. But breaking zero is basically the goal.
Yeah.
And then you can make, get some more investors or do whatever you have to do to make the next album. So this kind of stifled me a little bit. So it got my projects all screwed up, because I didn't really have the money to put out any albums until this one went out, and yet I had things I had to do. David Friesen was actually recorded before this album, and then this came along, and so we put that out first. So that's going to go, I don't know what's going to happen. Probably the New York thing will be recorded. We'll probably put out the David Friesen album with me, or John Stoll and I have also done an album before that, which should be coming out. Yeah, well, we've done a duo album as well, and that really deserves to come out because that's been at least 4 years ago, but I want to get that out. It sounds real good. We have enough for many more than just one album, but I'm just going to take the best of that. He and David both come up to play with me from Oregon to the Seattle area, and that's very nice because I get to play with them on a regular basis, maybe once every half a year. And this is the first time I went down to Portland this year to play. That's where they live, but I didn't play with them because they were on the road.
Gotcha.
So I played with somebody that I had played with in Europe in my band when I lived in Holland, and this guy's named John Butler, J.B. Butler, and he's a very fine guitar player. So he got a group together for me in Portland of some of the top musicians there, and I really enjoyed playing with them in a new club too, which was nice. I like to play in new clubs because they don't have an attitude,
Yeah.
And that's a nice feeling to go in and play, and we had a full house, and I'd never played there before, so that was cool. I don't know how, but maybe people are starting to listen to the music finally. I don't know, So that's kind of what I have planned. We're going to do this is what I have this month. The symphony here, the Bremerton Symphony, actually wants me to do a version of, well, I guess actually the actual thing, of the Bird with Strings album, and they have all the music, so I get to play behind an orchestra, so that should be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talk to me about your childhood growing up in Tacoma. You had, you kind of had a run of a hi-fi system. There was a lot of Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Art Tatum. Talk to me about how you got into jazz.
Oh, well, that's, most kids have a chance to get into jazz in this area. I don't know how the schools are in the United States because I've never lived everywhere in the United States, but most kids have a concert band that they play in when they become old enough. Usually they start getting some type of formal training if they want to in fourth grade or so, violin or clarinet. That's what I should have done, but I didn't because, my thinking was rather limited in those days, and so I had a saxophone. My grandfather had bought a saxophone for me, but it was a C Melody. It was his saxophone, that's right, and he said I could borrow it if I wanted to play music. But since they only taught clarinet and violin in those days, I waited until I was in junior high, which actually was in sixth grade this particular year because we had a new junior high school and they needed to fill it up. So we were the first class there. So we got to take band there. And like I said, most kids, I think, have a chance to be in band if they want to. In most schools, that's rapidly changing right now as the band programs get cut out because they think they're non-essential programs. And I'm not going to start talking about that because it just makes me too angry. I was lucky enough to have good teachers, and I started learning the instruments through the school program. And in 8th grade, was it 8th? I think it must have been 8th grade. Well, maybe 7th. I don't know what year I started playing, but they had a jazz band there, a stage band they called it, and most schools have these too. And this is how you get into jazz. And anybody has that opportunity. This is what I don't understand, why there are not more people listening to jazz. I have no idea compared to any other country in the world, I think, except for, countries without the opportunity to. I think there are more people per capita listening to jazz than this country. And I don't understand that. Canada knows everything about us, everything about our musicians. But do we know anything about theirs? The answer is not very much. We know the musicians once they become famous and cross the border. So we have a wall around us already, and it's an intellectual barrier, and unfortunately it's pointed inwardly, and that's something that has to change in this country. Otherwise, it's going to get worse and worse. But I'm not going to start talking about politics because then you'll really. And most musicians feel right now that it's probably the worst time in history in their entire lives that they've had in making a living as a musician or being appreciated as a musician. And definitely, if you're a recording person, if you record, you're not going to make much money at it because the intellectual highway didn't think it was important to have musicians get paid. So it put no regulations on the music, and now there are some, very little though, and you can just listen to music all day long, which is fine. But then let's get rid of money. Let's just get rid of money altogether. It's obsolete. It doesn't work. It doesn't tell the truth. Money itself was a system of trade between two people or more, which was supposed to be honest and fair, and that's how come you can use money. Is money now honest and fair? I don't think so. I think that some people use money to make more money. I think some people exaggerate the worth of their money and and diminish the other people's monetary system. I think that it is completely outlived its service to mankind, and of course it will fall apart anyway on its own. This is why I'm not what would you call that? A protester, I guess. This is why I'm not an active protester, is because I don't have to be. These systems that are bound for chaos and for their demise, their own demise, will come of themselves. They are not good systems. They are not balanced systems, and they are definitely not looking at the long term. Unfortunately, it could take us with us if we're not careful, and that That's just simply because we're living on a finite world, and we think in infinities. You see, we might not be able to conceptualize infinity, but we actually do, because that's how we treat the Earth, is that it is with endless resources, and it is not. And the thing that bothers me is that nobody does the math. It's not that hard to do. All you have to do is look at how much we have here, and then calculate how much we've changed it, and then calculate the rate of chemicals and gases, how they work together, and as in a finite spherical system, and then you're going to find out what's going to happen. And one of the things that I have done in my little small calculations, which may or may not be completely correct, is that our big problem is going to be the oxygen-carbon dioxide ratio, because when that starts to go, and it already is, it goes at an exponential rate. It's like a little bouncing ball. It goes boing, 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 and then you know it goes so fast. This is how these things work. Air is elastic. It works like that. Our systems are based on this finite spherical actual plane. Actually, it's actually a plane when you think about it, because the air itself is just a thin layer, and the rapid temperature increase in the oceans and other things which produce carbon emissions will basically set that ratio so that it kills the oxygen emitting sources, which it already has done. On land, yes, but the ocean's the thing we have to worry about. That's the main bulk of our world, not the land. And we've already destroyed the ocean. See, we just keep dumping stuff in. We don't clean it up because we think it's endless. And unfortunately, it's not endless. And I just don't like to see people suffer. So that's the thing that bothers me the most with arrogant people who think that they can produce anything they want and make a profit without any regard to the longevity of the human race. To me, that is probably one of the worst crimes and worst ways you can think in the world, and it shows complete selfishness. They're not ignorant. They're selfish. They don't understand. Yes, they understand. They understand how to make money. If they're that smart, they'll be able to understand that thing. They don't want to understand, so they pretend it's something else. And that's, again, arrogance. But they can't be arrogant against numbers, and they can't be arrogant against physics, because every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. In fact, that's another thing I wanted to do, is do my ballet, if I have time before the end of the world, and that is because I predict about 2030 would be our last breath, if that. But I say that the last chapter of the Bible, and I am not a Christian Bible thumper. I read the Bible, I pray, but that's my own business. I don't believe that religion should be out there in front of people, but you can study it and look at it, but it's served its time too. Now we have to think on our own spiritual level and use the religions of the world to understand things and see how they come together and see what the similarity is. It's the people that, again, the arrogant monsters of the world, which are producing all of this chaos, which are dividing the religions, which are dividing the people, even the Democrats and Republicans can't get along with each other. I'm neither one, by the way. But the government can't get along with no one, because we are being divided. That's why we're failing. And this country, mark my words, this country is failing. This country is failing as it's never failed before. And unless somebody stops and says, okay, let's get together on this, and this is what saving the world could do for us. We could get together. We have to get together, in fact. The only way that mankind will survive is if we get together. If mankind doesn't survive, it's because we did not get together. And then good riddance. That means that we don't deserve to survive. That's the way I look at it. So I look at things on a picture on a broad scale when I'm playing my music. My music is to enlighten people, to give them some kind of solace in this chaos of information and people telling you what to do so they can just listen to some tones and feel something other than all of this BS. And this then will cause, this is my opinion now, this is why I've lived my life, this will give them enough time, I guess you could say, freedom, let's say freedom, in their minds to be able to think a normal, logical thought, which is definitely necessary in this world. We are not thinking normally or logically right now. We are thinking abnormally, and we are thinking illogically, and we're thinking with our glands. And you can't think with your glands when you're trying to save the earth. You have to think with everything you got. And that's the way that I play my music. And this, I've written a ballet about the last chapter in the Bible, which I found rather interesting, because I've read all the different books. If I'd have to be something, I'd be a Taoist. If I'd have to be something, that's what I would be. If somebody would say, I'm going to kill you unless you tell me what you are, I say, I'm a Taoist. Okay, then that's the only reason I would like to have to be one, because I don't want to be anything. I want to be a being, a human being. We are not human doings, we're human beings. And this is what I want my music to do, is I want it to let people be so that they can understand. And they will understand, because it's all out there. It's nature. Nature will tell you what is right. And a lot of people have written religious texts about what they think about God. And basically that's what it is. And I read them, and I like to look at them. It's interesting because I've never been further than the fourth dimension, and the fourth dimension is just a line for me. So I just see time as a line, forward, backward. I'm right here in the middle. So that means that I don't understand religion, because that's all religion is, basically, is telling you how to act so that you will be able to become all that you can be. And anything else is a destructive part. P.D. Uspensky talked about this in the New Model of the Universe. And actually, that's one of my songs, too, 4D. And he talked about how you can either accent yourself and be more, or if you do wrongful things, then you'll diminish yourself and be less and less until you become nothing. And that was his idea of heaven and hell. I'd have to explain the whole chapter to give any actual meaning to that last statement, but if anybody's read P.D. Uspensky, then they might understand what I'm saying. But what I wanted to get back to is that there's 7 angels in the Bible which destroy the world. And I thought, this sounds very, very interesting to a physicist. That's what I was going to do if I wasn't a musician. So let me read this chapter. And I read it, and I said, yeah, it makes total sense to me. All these angels are basically reactions. This is physics. God is nature. These angels are the laws of physics, and the main law for every action, there'll be an equal and opposite reaction, and that's what the 7 angels are. So I wrote a ballet for this. And this ballet has, I'm trying to find somebody now that will produce it. Maybe I should go down to Kansas City. That's a good place for the arts. This has 7 movements to it, which starts off with a bass, just walking bass, and then the first is a swing movement. It starts to add the drums, I think, and then the piano. I'd have to look at the score again. It's been so long. Then it goes through and it plays this first number in a swing piece, and that's one of the easier things to understand in jazz, and it's one of the things that most people think jazz is that the beat, the swing sound. So we have that starting off the ballet, and then we go into a neo-bop thing, 3/4, then a ballad, and these are all segments for dancers. Now there's a quartet on stage, but they're off to the side, or maybe probably off to the side, and they're lit with 4 different colors. These 4 colors are 4 equal divisions of light. So you can divide light into as many colors as you want, as we know. You can divide it. It comes down to 3 primary colors that you can mix together and make any other color with. That's why there are 3 primary colors. You can actually make light with 2 colors that's white, but you can't make every color with those 2 colors. So you have the 3 primary colors. Well, you can also divide it into 4. So I have 4 colors now, which you can make any color that exists with. Now we're going to divide that and put a spotlight on every member of the band. Each one of these will have a color. Now, the ballet then has the dancers with these lights too. Of course, they're very bright on these dancers, and these correspond to the band. There's 4 dancers on stage. The dancers then are choreographed to do what most people do in jazz. That is, the movements will be choreographed together, except for the soloist. The soloist then, whoever's taking a solo at that time, will then go out and they will be the main dancer. The 3 other dancers now will improvise to accent and to accentuate what the dancer is doing and make it a whole unit. So they correspond just like a jazz group does, and you can refer back to each dancer. So if you see one that's the green one is, then you look at the green one's out there taking a solo. So then you look back at the band, and the bass player's taking a solo, and so it's showing people what jazz does.
Yeah,
it's like a basketball game is like jazz, but it goes so fast most people don't realize that.
Sure.
But this would be a great thing, and what you're going to see now are all these colors coming together before your eyes, mixing together. As the spotlights touch each other, they will make different colors, and the dancers will then have different colors on them as they touch each other, and that will be quite a beautiful experience, I think.
Absolutely.
So that's what I would like to work on as well. And then there's one more thing, the single I'm going to make with Mark Lewis. We're going to be dressed up as aliens, and we're going to do 2 songs because everybody wants to listen to vinyl again.
Sure.
Personally, I've done a lot of vinyl. I don't know what their problem is, but I guess they've never had to disc cut for a living. But vinyl, I can make some good vinyl if they want. In fact,
sure.
I'll make a 45, except I'll make it going 33 inches per second, and it will have a small hole in the middle, so they can play it on their record player, so they don't have to buy something or figure out something. And this then will have 2 songs I've written. One is called "The Day Has Come," basically looking at the world from an alien point of view, and the other one is called, let's see here, hold on here. It's all a show. So, and that's about basically what's going on right now. It says, if all they seem to tell you consists of pretty lies, and you don't make an effort, I'll tell you that ain't wise. Now don't believe the papers, they don't want you to know. I tell you what they want, you mustn't steal the show, it's all a show. And then we have this kind of like untrue, and it goes like that, and back to the tonic. Don't let you know what is in store for you. And then, it goes on, it has a few more select things about the government and things like this. So that's going to be on the other side. And then the way that the videos will come down is that we're going to come down in this spacecraft, and everybody's going to be around amazed, and just afraid and things. And so the guy comes out, and he's a gray head. He's an alien, one of the big-headed gray guys with big eyes. And he comes out and he puts his hand out because, of course, we want to shoot it. He says, no. Well, we shoot it anyway, and the bullets just bounce off his hand. He just catches them and throws them down. And says, and then he goes back. He says, and all of a sudden, none of the guns will work. And he motions us to come in. Inside is the band playing this song, you see, with all their controls and things like that. So that's going to be kind of cool. And the name of my group is called Mark Lewis and the Illegal Aliens.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's just too much stuff. If you ask a question like, what am I working on? That's going to take forever to tell you.
We'll pick it back up, sir. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your interest.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, Paris, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Mark for his wisdom, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.